So welcome to June's New Agent Mastermind with Ashley Richardson from Marchioni and Associates, which is over in Henrietta off of West Henrietta Road. Ashley and I have done, what, 3 deals?
A handful so far.
Yeah. And she is great. And she was the first person I thought of because she actually, in the middle of COVID, helped get a very big closing done. And it was a very messy transaction toward the end. And we actually had to issue time of essence, which does not normally happen. But we got everyone to the closing table, and I could not have done it without her.
We did it, and likewise.
And she actually drove the closing documents to my client's house all the way to Walworth and sat in the car on Zoom while they signed at their kitchen table. And then they put them back on the porch and she left. So,
oh my gosh.
Not that that's normal service, but
when you say it like that, I sound crazy.
Well, we were just all trying to get it done at that point, right? No, because that was the 7th day. So we didn't have a choice. Like the deal would have fallen apart at 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Ashley's great. And
that's not crazy. That's dedicated.
I like that better. Actually.
Yeah. And we talk about communicating and how important it is in communication in real estate. And, Ashley over communicates with both the agent and the client. And Ashley was on the other side of the deal with my client. Of a different deal. And when we left the office, he went over and got her card and handed it to me and said, this is my new attorney because I didn't like mine. And it was because we got more information from Ashley and her team than his attorney. And so, keep that in mind as we talk about, building those relationships in real estate and how important it is to always communicate, and keep touching people. So anyway, so Ashley is going to touch base about what she's seeing on the attorney side of things.
Yeah. So as you all probably are aware, the market right now is so incredibly aggressive. Sellers are having a field day. They're getting a lot of money for these properties and they have all of the leverage. So I've seen a lot of agents for the buyers being really creative to give their buyers a leg up too in this market. So I've written down some things that I've seen. Obviously, there's a ton of escalation clauses. I think more than half of the contracts that I'm seeing right now have escalation clauses, which are helpful for sellers, but also helpful for buyers because it does give them the option to stay competitive against other offers if they can come up in the price. So those can be helpful on both ends. Right of first refusal is nice too. We're trying to be really super quick with these approvals for buyers so that the sellers can't accept any other offers on our account at least. So on the other end, when I have a seller contract come in, I've been waiting half a day, maybe towards the end of the day, to do the approval for the sellers because oftentimes they get another last minute offer in that they might want to entertain. So to give them a little bit of a chance to get all those last minute offers in, I'll wait a little bit. Or if the agent asks me to hold off to the end of the day, I'll do that too. I've also seen, and this was more so during the coronavirus shutdowns, that buyers could view the property within 48 hours. I'm still seeing a little bit of that trickling in. I think it's because sometimes buyers want to get offers in on these properties without having had the chance to get in first. So that's a nice contingency to add in if you have to, if your buyer just can't get there, but they want to make sure their offer gets in front of the seller. And then, of course, to stay competitive, inspection contingencies are being left off of these contracts, which can be risky. So I always recommend if you have a buyer that wants to stay competitive and not have an inspection. It might be worth it to add in, however, that the seller should have a furnace inspection and an air conditioning inspection or specific repairs done, so that we can pinpoint important things without making the sellers nervous about having an entire inspection contingency on the contract. So that's been pretty smart. I did that with my own house, actually. I did not have an inspection, but they had the furnace inspected and cleaned, same with the AC unit, so that was nice. And finally, I think it's super duper important to not have any mistakes on the contract, nothing missing, because sellers and their attorneys are really good about capturing those and using it against us if their sellers get another offer. They can kind of slide out of your contract, your offer, if there's a mistake that they can use against us. So contracts being filled out fully and completely and correctly are it's especially important right now. We've been doing pretty good about capturing them and marking things off in our approval if necessary, but just all eyes on deck would be cool.
Yeah. I've taken that as a compliment when I get a call and say, well, you didn't get the deal, but boy, you wrote a nice contract.
Yeah, it is a compliment.
As a newer agent, they're like, as a newer agent, because I looked at your number, you wrote a great contract. I'm like, well, thank you. At least I did something right.
Yeah,
But
you always fill everything out. I love it.
I'm pretty meticulous with my paperwork. What are you seeing in attorney approval? Like, I know that we were talking in our leadership call at 3:30 today that we're starting to see that attorneys are actually putting in specific repairs that need to be done in their attorney approval. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't.
Okay.
I haven't, but I would personally be open to it. If it's not captured in the contract, I'll slide it into my approval so that our buyers are getting, something to work off of. It's risky though, because if the sellers are really going into this like, I don't have to do anything, then we can get a disapproval on our hands.
Right. What's your feeling on putting in the contract that the inspection is for buyers' informational purposes only? So like, what's the legal side on that?
I actually love that too. If you've got a buyer that doesn't mind taking that report and using it for themselves and not relying on the seller to do anything, that's an awesome tool, because they're not going to be blind or surprised once they're in the property. Under New York State merger doctrine, anything once the documents are signed is no longer the responsibility of the seller. So if we can have the buyer fully apprised of what to expect, even if the seller's not going to do anything, I think that's still super helpful.
Right.
And then we're not getting that call 3 months from now about the furnace being.
Oh, you mean like the air conditioning that we got a call about?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the air conditioning
The
is
seller
not working.
conversations.
So let's see. Are you noticing that most attorneys are getting their approvals out in one day, or are they dragging out, or does it just depend on attorney?
So it'll depend on the attorney, but I am seeing them coming out a little bit quicker now, because I think everybody's realizing that with the way the market is, we could be responsible for our clients losing a deal because we didn't get the approval out quick enough. So I think we're being mindful of that.
I'm going to open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Ashley?
Bring it on.
I'm sure Jennifer has something.
Jenna always has good questions.
Hi, Jennifer. Good to see you.
Yes, it's nice to see you in person. We spoke on the phone and you talked to me about contracts and how we could work together. So it is nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to see you.
You're in very good hands, Jen.
Thank you.
I'm biased, but I think so too.
Probably. I have another question. What about the like appraisal gap? What kind of language are you seeing? Are you seeing that more in attorney approval or more actually in the contract?
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm seeing a mixture.
Right.
I am seeing that. So if you don't appraise at the purchase price, that the buyer will cover the difference. Phew, that is kind of scary. But if the buyer's got it, all the power to them.
Have you also, that came up in our leadership call today too about, you know, like we'll pay the gap up to 10,000 or 15,000 where there's some protection for the buyer. Would you recommend that on the buy side versus just the open-ended?
Most definitely. You just never know. These houses' values have shot through the roof, and the buyers will have no recourse if they have to cover a difference of 30,000 and they just don't have it. They're in breach.
Right. So as Ashley knows, I went under contract on Father's Day, and the agent called and said, will your buyers be able to pay the gap? And I was like, you know, as far as I know, yes, but put it in the contract and counter back, and, you know, we'll be more than happy to review it. And she goes, no, that's fine. I don't need to do it. And so I want to remind you guys that if it's not in the contract, it does not exist. And so when I sent the approval over, I, you know, talked to Ashley and said, just FYI, this may come up during attorney approval, and it didn't. So, I mean, like, he does not actually have to pay the gap because it's nowhere. So he will still be able to negotiate at that point. So, you know, those little tricks and, you know, all these classes that we take at KW to help us be super educated on how a situation works is so important, because when I called Ashley, I was like, I'm right, correct? Like, it doesn't exist. And I was, you know, so it's always good to, you know, keep up on this stuff and have a good, again, that open communication with the attorneys so that she knew it was coming so she could prep and know what was going on. I mean, when we were finishing up the one COVID deal, we were talking, what, 3-4 times a day?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was
having a blast.
It was, yeah, we were doing conference calls with the sellers. And I mean, it was COVID, so it wasn't like we were going anywhere. So, yeah.
The
So
communication is great. I love heads up and just so you knows. I love it. And I'm always available for a phone call or an email.
right. Last question, then I'm going to let you go. Generators. Remember we talked about this? So I showed a house for another agent, whole house generator connected to the house. And she calls me after they had their offer accepted and said, the seller wants to take the whole house generator with them, and it's not excluded on the MLS sheet. It's not listed on the MLS sheet, but it was in the photos. And I reached out to Ashley just for her opinion, whether or not that was real property that went with the house or personal property, and where that should land on the contract. Now, I will say it was being battled out in attorney approval, which was really weird. And they were using it as leverage for them not to ask for repairs on the inspection. They were like, well, she'll leave it if you don't ask for repairs, but if you ask for repairs, she's going to take it with her. So it was a very interesting thing that I hadn't seen. And so it made me think, well, where should that be so that that would never happen?
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
I really think it would be nice if they would add that to the contract, because, you know, in the personal property section of the contract, I might be too far now, they have certain items that are automatically considered fixtures to the property, and that should be one of them.
And
I'll send a note to,
It's not currently.
No, it really should be. I'm going to send a note to Kirsten Lamb, who was one of the people one of the attorneys that drafted that new contract. Something to consider. So if there's a whole house generator on a property that you're dealing with, I don't know, maybe just tuck it into the personal property agreement to cover your bases in case we have another situation like that. But those are fixtures. They're fitted for the home. They're enormous. They're for the home. That agent was out of Timbuktu with that.
Yeah, it was interesting. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when in doubt, might as well include it.
Usually those are on a cement slab, and there's some other structure around it.
Yes. I mean, it's not portable. You know?
No.
So that was wild.
That was really strange.
Yeah, but I guess it's just one of, if you're not sure, throw it on. It doesn't hurt.
Right. So if you guys don't have any other questions for Ashley, I'm going to let her get on with her evening.
I'm dismissed. Good
You
to,
are.
good to speak to you all. And
Thanks for joining us.
my pleasure. It was nice to
Thank
see
you,
you all.
Ashley.
Ever have questions or concerns, you can bring them to me. And I'd love to work with all of you and any of you.
Could you put your email and contact phone number in the chat?
Yes, I can. Everyone. Okay, I got it. I'll do that now. ARichardson@JM Law Firm is my email. And my direct line, so you don't have to go through the receptionist, it'll come directly to me, is that number. Property, office address, incoming.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, you guys.
You're welcome. Thanks, Ashley.
Bye.
So I'm going to shift, I think, a little bit and talk about open houses briefly. So who has done an open house? Jen did one with me. Let's say that. Has anyone else done an open house post-COVID?
I did one without you too.
You did. That's true. You did.
Oh, did you do one for Harlan?
I did. Yeah.
Cool.
So the way, so I did 2 open houses over the weekend. There's an app called, which Chris knows that I'm in love with, called Queuepad. I put it in the chat. It's not free. I think it's $20 a month, but it gave you a 30-day trial, and I don't think that we're going to have these restrictions forever. So I figured it was worth the trial for now and how much I use it. But it's on your phone. And Jen, I actually figured out how to link devices. So you can put in name, address, and phone number. If you have a Twilio number through command, you can link it to that. And it will text the person when they're the next in line. So, at a busy open house, they can sit in their car. My first open house was on Wall Street. There was like 20 different parties. It was craziness. And they were lined up before I could even get the sign in the ground, which is always a good sign. But we were able to just, Jay Sackett helped me with that one. He went down initially and just got everyone checked in. And then because the house was not vacant, there was a lot of clients that came through without, what's the word I'm looking for? Without their agents. And so we walked them through and toured the house to a certain degree. We let them have, kind of free reign, but we were always around to answer any questions and make sure, nothing got taken, and that kind of stuff. So, we went in one door, we went out another, so that kept things, we tried to keep showings to about 10 minutes. We wiped things down that they touched afterwards. Feedback was good. When Jen helped me with my open house, she actually went through and did the feedback in the forms with them, which limited, how much they touched and things like that. But do you have, I guess let's talk about, do you have something holding you back from holding an open house post-COVID? I know you don't, Jen, because you already did one, but.
Bring it on.
Jane or Ron, where are you in, doing an open house?
Oh, I'm open to doing an open house.
Okay. So tips that I found really useful were, watch the Facebook page when somebody posts that they need help. I told Jen, just post, say, hey, I'm willing to do an open house. Sometimes people don't even ask, and just by you reaching out and showing some initiative, they'll give you one. We talked about thanking agents, right, Jen, after, sending a handwritten note, thanking them for allowing you to do the open, and building that relationship, because you want to be their go-to. You don't want them to post it on Facebook, just like you don't want your sphere to list with someone else. Let's see, what else we got? Jen, what do you think we could have done differently with the open? Because you did yours a little differently.
I was doing it at a vacant house, like you mentioned. So at a vacant house, I didn't feel compelled to tour them through or be protective of possessions. And I was appreciative that it was a nice pace of people that stopped by. I didn't ever have more than one party waiting at a time. And it was actually kind of nice because it sort of facilitated an opportunity to chat a little with these buyers while they were waiting. So I liked that.
Were there any buyers that came through that weren't represented?
One couple, this cracked me up. They're like, yeah, we have an agent. What's his name again? So I'm like, hey, look, here's another ranch and you're in the same price range. Do you want me to send it to you? And they're like, sure. And I didn't feel like I was poaching, because when I looked back on the sign-in sheet where it said realtor, they put NA. So the agent they were referring to was someone that helped them sell their mother's house like 3 years ago. So it wasn't somebody that they were currently engaged with. I felt like it was fair.
So what does follow-up look like to you on an open house lead like that?
To me, I did send them the property that we talked about, and based on conversation, a couple others that met their criteria. A little more talking about their financial situation and offering to connect them with a loan officer, rep.
Okay.
And they had somebody that they were already investigating. He wanted to do like what's it called? He was basically going to use his investments to buy and then refinance after. So that was his plan. So he already kind of had somebody that he was talking to about that option. They were educated buyers. They were not first-time buyers. They were looking for their, retirement type single-level living home. So follow-up was sending them a couple of leads or a couple of listings that I thought might be interesting to them. And offering to, I know that some agents would not feel, I don't know. I know this isn't, you guys can yell at me, but I was willing to take them to a listing as if they wanted to see one, just have an opportunity to be with them, show them some value, offer to get them in a house. It's not like I'm that busy as a new agent that I can't take a potential client to a house, and I wouldn't go to dozens, but I would take them to one or two. And then if they really weren't willing to talk specifically finances, get a pre-qual to me, through me or with me and work with me, then I would back off, but I would be willing to take them. That would be my level of follow-up.
So let's talk about agency for a second. So when agency fall into that, right?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little probably because I laughed. What did you say?
Agency. So when does agency fall into that? Because, in this new market, things are quick, and we can't just say stop at the office and we'll do my little presentation. So where would you interject the signing of those disclosures and the stuff that we have to get done in that timeline?
I could see the advantage of doing it before I bring them to a house at all, and just saying like, okay, good, you want to go see this? We just got to do a little, as Kaylee calls it, a little housekeeping. We got a few things we need to sign. Let's talk through this and then we'll go. I'm new I haven't had to encounter this a whole lot yet, so I probably should think about that. With my last buyers, I just put their agency docs in with the purchase offer that we wrote.
So
That would be the wrong answer.
you always, always, always want to do agency after your first conversation. And I'll give you a great example. So I was referred a potential lead from another KW agent earlier this week because they didn't, when a team has a listing, anyone on the team is considered the dual agent because everything is run through the team leader or the rainmaker. So the buyer was comfortable with a dual designated, but not a dual agent. And even though it was not that particular agent's listing, it was within the team, and that's how New York State works. So they referred it to me. We are convinced that it was a tester, to be perfectly honest, because she asked a lot of questions about agency. She asked a lot about how we were trained in agency. She said, oh, I used to work in real estate in Washington, D.C. I'm always interested to, know how other people handle it. And we had a very brief conversation, and she said, could you send me some comps? And I said, absolutely. And so I said, just text me your email. And I took the email, put it into Transaction Desk, sent it off, and sent her a quick thing and said, to protect you as the consumer, I always have my, before we get any deeper, sign these few disclosures. It doesn't hold you to anything. I didn't do buyer agency, just the disclosure. So I did COVID, fair housing, and agency. I did those three. I said, this is just to make sure that you understand how we're going to keep you safe, that everything we talk about from this point on, I am bound by confidentiality. And if you come through one of my listings, I can't say a word. I have to act like I know nothing. And fair housing, that we're not going to discriminate, and you can't ask me to discriminate either. She signed them and sent it back, and about 3 minutes later sent me and the other agent the same text, which pretty much said, I've decided to work with another agent. In 3 minutes. But I thank you for your time, and I didn't want to waste your time. And so she did that to the other agent as well. And she showed up to their open house saying that another agent was supposed to meet her there, and he never showed up. And so that was like her introduction to, oh, I need a real estate agent. So, just keep that in mind. Not that I'm saying your people are testers, Jen. People are willing to sign those disclosures pretty easily if you just explain what they're for. Like, this is to protect you, the consumer.
So that's the important thing, is the disclosure. It's this whole emphasis on having agency documents signed before I go too far down the road. It doesn't have to be the agency agreement. It can just be the disclosure.
Correct. The disclosure is the one that New York State's going to slap your hand and you're going to get in trouble if you don't have. The buyer agency is more to solidify, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, to solidify that buyer agent relationship so that they understand that, if they go to a for sale by owner and they're not going to pay the commission, that they may have to pay you. It's setting more of, I look at that as more setting expectations.
Well, and the agency agreement is a contract. None of the other ones are contracts. They're just disclosures. And you get them signed to indicate that you have had a discussion with them so that they know what your duties are, as their agent, and that they know about the COVID situation, and that they know that you're going to conform, with the fair housing. Right. And so they are not binding, as Jeffrey said. They are just disclosures. But when I took class, the word was at first substantive contact.
And Lisa teaches a great agency class, and I, in my open house folder with all that paperwork, Jen, I have a agency disclosure that's blank, and I have an agency disclosure that says I represent the seller, because sometimes, honestly, you get into a situation at an open house where people are sharing a lot, and you have to remind them that you, at that moment, are there to represent the seller, not them, if they're unrepresented. And I always just point that out and say, I'll call you in an hour and I'm all yours. And they really appreciate that transparency. So, because that first substantive contact could be at an open house, right? Those screening questions could be considered that level of contact. So, and I didn't know that when I started, and I had done a ton of opens, and this fall Lisa taught the agency class and that came up. So now I have it. And I think I've only had one person sign it. And they were like, that's great. And I said, and as soon as, this is up, I'll call you and you can sign a new one that I'm representing you. That being open, transparent, really starts to solidify that relationship, that it's not about the sale, it's about, it's about them, helps. So not saying you did anything wrong, by the way.
Right. And I have also not had them signed until I wrote an offer.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it never
I
happened.
explained everything to them. We sat and we were talking, and I should have just had them sign it, but the circumstances were not ideal. We were behind those little tables behind Starbucks. The Wi-Fi was weak. I was trying to pull the stuff up. And so they said, can you just tell us? So I just was telling them, and they said, Jennifer. Well, English was their second language. They're like, this is so formal. Why are you telling us these things? Like, because it's important. You need to understand, like, what I owe you. I'm working for you. I want you to understand that. And they're like, okay, if you have to, go ahead.
So you guys know that I hate paper, right? But what I've been doing is I will print those out. And because we're also supposed to give them back to the clients. So I have been printing them out. I just met with a new person last night. We talked for a little bit, and then we went over, each one of them, and he signed them. And then I took a shot of them with Cam Scanner and gave them back to him. So I have my DocuSign email address in my contacts. So I just forwarded it directly into DocuSign.
Nice.
And then it's
just sitting there waiting for me to put it in his opportunity.
Beautiful.
So my suggestion on how to get that signed before you show them property would be just enclose it. I would probably group it in with the COVID disclosure, and just say, there's 3 disclosures. One is about your health and COVID-19, agency that we've already spoke about, and just briefly explain it to them, and then fair housing, which is a new law that went into effect June 20th, right, Chris? So, and just say that, we sign these once unless something changes. Now, I have been in the habit, and I don't know how Chris feels, I always have them re-sign agency when we write an offer.
So let me throw in, I also bring a copy of the franchise addendum, because that only needs to be signed once. Yeah. So I get all of that taken care of up front. I do not do a new agency disclosure because, one, you don't have to send it with the offer. Actually, there's no reason to send it with the offer unless you're a dual.
Right.
So the only way I do a new one is if I'm a dual.
Okay. I got it. Go ahead.
Oh, I keep the one with the buyer or the seller. And that's, turned in with your initial paperwork. But yeah, so if I'm a dual, I'll bring out a new one and then have both the buyer and the seller sign that. But I always keep my original one.
Right.
So Chris, whenever you have the original one signed, you hand that back to them and you keep the copy basically.
So yeah, so you are actually, and I will admit that I don't always do this, you should actually make sure that your people have a copy of what they've signed.
But not the original.
Well, that's what I did. Because you don't need the original.
Okay.
I just have started doing a shot with Cam Scanner. And so turn that into a PDF and that's what I turn into the office. So I've got it. It's all digital, and I give the original back to the person. That's the way I started doing stuff recently.
There's no rule on who should keep the original. It's just that that you keep it on file for so many years. 5, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the number is.
I thought it was 3.
Yeah, I think it's, thanks, Chris. So I actually have I'll grab it. Chris knows how organized I am. I have, it's just a file folder with tabs in it with last name. And that's where I tuck them. And I hold on to them. And then at the end of the year, my plan is just to take the dividers out and just scan it. So at least it's A, B, C. It's not in alphabetical order, but at least the first letter is in alphabetical order. So it'll,
And here's mine from last night.
that's
And
just
it's
how
already over to DocuSign.
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Sure.
Only because I believe I probably include way too many pieces of paper in my purchase offers. So the disclosure doesn't need to be attached. So that would mean also fair housing doesn't. And yet, like earlier in the meeting, I just kind of keep hearing different information on the fair housing, whether that is just for our records or if it should be included in, I don't know what. Okay, so
Yeah. It's
neither
for your
fair housing
records
or-
with your client.
that's strictly right for us to keep for our records in case, I guess, we're ever asked.
Right. And it's for you to turn into the office.
And to go into the office, right, when we do our
Yep.
paperwork.
Yep.
Okay.
so
Jane, I think you might be getting confused between the actual disclosure and the notice, because I know that was talked about at the meeting where they're having the notice put in the MLS and they're using the notice in some of their marketing versus the disclosure that you have signed. So you might be thinking of that's where it's getting mixed in with other documents.
Oh, maybe, because, if I wasn't listening really, diligently, yes, that might be what I picked up. Thanks, Chris.
So the reason that I got in the habit of, and partially because that's the way my mentor taught me, was the reason I put agency back into the purchase offer is when I send it over for signature, I go over it in the buyer. I go over the contract with them in the buyer presentation. Like, this is what this means, this is what that means. But, after 10 houses, do they remember? They don't remember. So I always put that in the beginning, and I have them sign that and fair housing again, just because it's there. And when I send the offer for signing, I say, please call me and we'll review page by page, because, back in the day, you would have to have come and you would have went over the contract, right? And now with technology, we don't have to. And so I just use it as another opportunity to say, so during, if your purchase offer is accepted, these are the duties that you need to hold me accountable to. And, it just, again, solidifies that relationship that their best interests is your top priority. I don't know if it really makes a difference. It was just a nice habit. I also like, as I was telling Chris, Jane, I don't think you can ever include too much in your purchase offer. I think if it's not necessary, they just glance over it. I put my MLS printout in my, of the house in there. And basically when that contract comes back signed, if there's no inspection, all I'm waiting for is 2 attorney approvals and a copy of a check, and I can submit my paperwork to Noel. I put it in order in DocuSign or in Transaction Desk when we're doing the signing, in the order that the checklist is. So it takes a few minutes extra, but when it comes back, I just download the PDF. Everything's in the right order, and I can add those few things into the other into the PDF, and off it goes. So that's just why I got into the habit of doing that. But you don't have to. Chris is 100% right. And Jen, there's nothing wrong with getting something signed on the trunk of your car. I mean, it's not the best practice, but I mean, it happens. So, if they don't want to sign electronically those documents, just before you go in the house, say, here's the COVID questionnaire, here's these disclosures, and you're fine.
Honestly, I'd be more comfortable with the paper because I don't know, it just in those moments, it is simpler. It just to point out what I'm talking about, use it as an outline. I'm not trying to share my screen outside. They can't see it. It is their Wi-Fi. I don't know. I don't have a hotspot. Like, I think that there is something simple about paper. No offense, Chris. I still am kind of partial. I do love trees though.
Yeah, but I mean, for that, like I said, I've found that it's easier to do that with paper. So when I put my original package together that I'm going to, discuss, the buyer process and everything, I have those documents that they're going to sign that we're going to go over and sign over on the other side. So yes, I do that.
Okay. Did you guys know this? Like, I know that, Chris, you mentioned this CAM scan app, but I learned this in the real estate group, the Rochester real estate group. If you open up, so in notes, oh, you can't see my screen, but in notes, if you touch, like this is an iPhone, and then you touch the camera at the bottom, there's an option for scan documents.
Cool.
So it's built into the iPhone. I don't know. It was new to me. So cool.
I didn't know that either, but I saw it on one of the real estate things.
Yeah.
Really.
Will it square things up like Cam Scanner does?
I've never used Cam Scanner. Let's see. Let's position the document. Let's see what happens. There.
So do an angled one.
Yeah, look it's giving me.
Giving you
it's
lines.
not- What's that?
It's giving you lines so you can square it up.
Yep.
Cool. Perfect.
Yep, letting me. Yeah. Oh yeah. I can totally turn it into a trapezoid.
Okay, cool.
Look at that. We learned something new today.
May I also share back to Jen some great wisdom from Chris in regards to meeting people at open house. They're not represented, having them go ahead, sign the disclosure. But Chris suggested to me, I'm like, well, how do I really get going with these people? She goes, get them set up on an MLS search. And she says, you have enough information to kind of know what it is they want. And they keep getting emails with your name on it. And I, because like I'd say to her, well, I've met some of these people. They're like a year out. They're this. She goes, get them set up on that search. So, and finally these people, it's taking, but finally these people are coming around to me like, okay, I think we know now what we want, so that was great wisdom from Chris.
For me, because I don't have a whole lot of buyers that are taking up a lot of time, I set up the search, but I send it to myself with their name in the subject line so that I can see what these houses are, and then I can just more personally communicate with them. Hey, look what popped up today. For me, but that's because I'm not, I don't have that many people, but I like doing it that way for now.
Have you tried concierge mode?
Right.
No, what's that?
Exactly what you just said.
It goes into, it sends you an email and says that there's some pending homes. So like my relocation person, I used it on him because in Victor, Farmington, Canandaigua, in his price point, there were a ton of new builds. And let me tell you, they list new builds constantly, like 2 and 3 a day to keep, new, because they have so many lots available. That I was picking those out because new builds were out initially. But MLS, the matrix will send you that you have to review them, and you can reject them or then approve them. And if you approve them, they go. The other thing I use that I like is the BCC option when you're setting it up.
I have that set up for the ones that were receiving it directly from the MLS. I always got notified of what they were sent.
Always great to see what they got, so that you can just communicate and say, hey, by the way, this is where we are. So okay. Since we haven't talked about this yet, and we have about 10 minutes, so we have time. Open house safety. So have you thought about open house safety?
After that poor woman, yes.
Um,
Where was that? Somewhere North Carolina, Georgia? Just this week? A woman was attacked, a real estate agent was attacked at an open house.
Yeah, I think it was Virginia, maybe.
so, in certain, in even seasoned agents, one of my first open houses was with Val Clapp. It was a house down it was down in the city. And she was just like, I just want an extra body here. It was a vacant house. There were a lot of doors and entrances. And it was on a very quiet street where there was some construction. So a couple of the homes had been taken down. So there wasn't a lot of witnesses, we'll say. So she had posted on Facebook and was just like, who can come and help me at this open house, because she had a weird vibe by one of the first people that had walked through the door. And so, I went and joined. So you can always, do a co-open house if you're worried. One of the other tips is never go in the basement, or never lead the tour. Always let them go first. You don't want to be backed into a corner. Try to keep one point of entry in and out, front door only. If they go out the back door, you're locking it behind them. You don't want somebody coming in from, the backyard and somebody coming in from the front yard. You want options. What else?
Jeffrey, what about that app that auto checks in with you? I can't remember which real estate place showed it, but it timed and it would call someone if you didn't respond within 30 minutes.
I don't know about that. Chris, do you know about that?
Well, so that's what I was looking for, because I know one of our mobile apps has something, and I think it may be Supra.
Yeah.
And so I first went to Home Snap and it's like, nope, that's not it. And then I went to Showing Time and it's like, nope, that's not it. So I went to Supra, and you have to go to it on the web to configure the alert feature. You can't configure it in the mobile app, but I think well, you've got the app if you've got an e-key. But I think you can set up an alert type system. So you'd want to go into Supra via GRAR on the portal to look at that.
So just be aware of your surroundings. I always get to an open house early. I let myself in. I lock the door behind me. Even showing safety, you really, unless you've personally met somebody, because you get calls. And Jen, I want to say Kaylee used to get calls to try to just go show me a house without meeting me type thing. And you don't want to do that. Like that deal is not worth it, because most agents are not going to show a house without at least meeting at a coffee shop or a public place so that you can get a vibe. If you're nervous, ask another agent to tag along. Just that, just little things like that. But I go into the open house, I shut the door behind me, I lock it. Jen, you saw me do it even in Pittsford. I don't care where I am. I want to walk through the house. I want to get a feel for the house. I want to get the lights on, and I want to, get the layout, especially if you're doing with somebody that's not your listing. You haven't been in the house yet. I check out the basement. I check out the attic. I get a really good feel for the house so that I have options if, God forbid, something happened. And then again, I try to limit it to one door. When people want to go out the patio door, that's fine. What I'll tell them is, that's great. If you go out and do the outside, just come back in through the front door. And some people ask, I just say, safety first, and most people get it. people who want you to go down in the basement with them. I will go down maybe 3 steps behind them and just talk to them while they're touring. You know, like, oh, the furnace is over to your right. Furnace and hot water tank's over to your right. If you go over to the left, you'll see the, you know, the breaker box. So I'm still kind of with them, but not like, I don't go past the 3rd step, just far enough down to that they could still hear me when they're in the basement. And even that's probably not even necessary, but so you just want to be aware of what's around you. That's all. Did I miss anything on that, Chris?
No, you pretty much got it.
Fran Blon, is it Blonsky? Did I say that right? Or from Sign
Yeah.
Design? Yeah. If you call them and say, I want an open house rule sign, they have one, and it's like, you know, you'll take your shoes off, you'll sign in, you may have to provide your driver's license. There's like all these little rules, but it's just a little like stake sign that you stick in near the front door. That's great for managing those expectations as people are walking up. And if you ever felt uncomfortable, you could technically ask for a driver's license. But if you're going to start asking for driver's license, you really have to ask everyone. Or at least that's what we were told at Legal Update. So, you know, again, it goes along with, I mean, to a certain degree, fair housing, that if you do it for one, you should do it for all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to give that perception that you're treating one group differently than the other. But those are all good tips. And even when I show a house, I put the key in my pocket. I always have my phone. Oh, and I always have my phone in my hand at the open house. Always. I want to be able to call for help if I needed it, and not have to go over to a counter or my purse. Well, I don't have a purse, but you know, your purse or bag. But it's showing I always have my phone, even if it's a lockbox. And I always put the key in my pocket, and I lock the door behind me. Again, you don't know who's just going to show up and want a tour. I was at a listing just a couple weeks ago, and this guy wanted to see it. And I said, well, give me a few minutes. Let me talk to you when I'm done with my client. And he had told the other agent that came after, who was waiting, that he was next. And I came out, and the guy goes, oh, so, you know, you're showing 2 clients. Good for you. And I was like, you can go ahead. I've got to talk to, you know, Melvin. And I did not end up showing him the house. There were some specifics in the private remarks that we had to provide proof of funds before an in-person showing. So I explained that to him, and he ended up getting me his proof of funds, and I showed it to him the next day. But I mean, like, he was coming up the stairs ready to just follow us in. Almost like it was an open house. And even the other agent said, yeah, I got a weird vibe from that. So I you know, because he asked me after, like, everything good, you're okay? So, you know, just keep your eyes peeled, because you never know. So those are my showing rules, at least. And again, let your client go in front of you. Vanna White it, you know. There's the stairs, knock yourself out. So we only have a minute or so left, but do you guys have any questions or topics that you'd like to see in the next mastermind? I am a popular guy tonight.
No, I just, this ends up feeling like a nice coaching session. I love it.
Yeah,
Well, I
thanks,
mean,
Jeffrey.
That's what it's meant for. I mean, we're getting there. I hope Ashley was helpful to you guys. I will put my thinking cap on who I want to bring in next. It's a little hard to get the home inspectors or the photographers right now. So I think that we're gonna have to hold those until the fall, but we'll bring, I'm hoping to have somebody on to give you guys some value and some, you know, market view from a non-real estate agent viewpoint, just so you can educate yourself as to what people are seeing out there, because it may help you get a client, or it may help you get a deal, or get an accepted offer.
Well, even just having the input from you who are more experienced than us is helpful. It doesn't have to be somebody outside of real estate, because there's still plenty that you guys have to teach us that is super helpful.
And, you know,
Thank
and
you.
remember, I'm still
Very
new.
true.
Or I still consider myself a new agent. I mean, I am coming up on a year and in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. So I'm still new.
Well, that's encouraging too, though, to see how well you are doing so soon. But I think you still have a sense of what it feels like to be brand new, and that is helpful.
I'm still scared most of the time. Chris knows. I'm still think that, you know, like I have a, if I've said this before, I'll apologize in advance, but I have a fear of not having enough money. I've had that for a long time, and that drives me to continually work hard. I don't know why I have that fear, but I do. And so even when I get a closing check, I'm looking at like, okay, where's the next one? When's the next one? Like, even though I'm, you know, I read profit first and I'm, you know, modeling my business after that, it's not the same. I'm always worried that I'm not going to have enough clients. I don't know if that ever goes away, Chris.
Well, and okay, so he's also super competitive. And a lot of it is he's very competitive with himself.
Yeah. That's true.
So it's your nature, and you're also very, very detail oriented. So you study, you learn, you understand things so that you can have, you know, so that you're comfortable. Okay, and maybe you're not comfortable, but you sound comfortable having the conversations.
Right. Well, it's that saying, fake it till you make it.
Yep.
To a certain degree, you need just enough information to be dangerous. So, and I mean, even a year in, there's things that I'm now pulling out of Ignite that I didn't pull out the first time, and things to think about. So, and teaching the you know, sell your listing, it's, you know, every time I teach it, I think of another thing, or I've talked to another agent about what they do or how it worked when they did something. I mean, I talked to 3 big agents today about one of my listings and got 3 different perspectives, all basically the same, but just from different points of view, and different approaches. And I had not had to do a market absorption spreadsheet because things in my normal price point was selling very quickly. You know, you knew if it was 160 in Webster that you wouldn't have any problem selling it. So I hadn't really had to do a market absorption because I knew at the price points that I was at previous that it would absorb in 2 days or 3 days or whenever the delayed negotiations were up. But this, I'm in a different price point, I'm in a different market, and I'm learning how to navigate that above $500,000 market. And the difference that was shocking to me was it was a difference of 2 months versus 9 months if the price was lowered by 15,000. That's substantial. So I'll see you at bingo, Jane. You know, so just, you're constantly learning. It's never over. And I mean, and there's, like, for example, like Tiffany Hilbert helped me with the market absorption, but she came to me and asked me about how my open houses went and how I did it. And we were like brainstorming back and forth on how to, you know, simplify the process. And I mean, I'm a new agent. I mean, like Tiffany Hilbert, she knows what she's doing. She doesn't need me, but, you know, she reached out and wanted to see, you know, what worked, what didn't. So, I mean, that's what Keller Williams is all about.
Love that.
Yep, I was
So-
going to say exactly the same thing. I mean, he talked with 3 different agents to pick their brain about, you know, how he could, you know, figure out what was going on, what would work the best with his property. And everybody was happy to work with him.
Right. And my question was, I'm the lowest house in the neighborhood. why did I sell and everything higher sold? And I mean, other than price, you know, a few I knew why, you know, they were nicer, you know, those types of things. But why did somebody not at least want to write an offer on the lowest priced house out of 6 in the same neighborhood? And those 5 have sold and are under contract. And when I looked at the market in Pittsford, everything in above like 400 is now selling after a significant price reduction, and then it takes about 2 weeks. Even each one of those listings had reduced, still higher than mine, but reduced, you know, got new interest and a new price point, and then they sold. So, you know, knowing that market is helpful. And so that's probably what our plan is, but we'll see what my sellers want to do. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I have to jump on the Women's Council of Rochester virtual bingo night.
I have to go too, so, but I really appreciated this. I love
Yeah,
these.
thanks, Jeffrey.
I'm in my office every day, as Chuck and Lisa said. So,
I'll probably see you tomorrow.
okay, you can always stop by if you have questions. I'm here most of the time, unless I have showings.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great night, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.